It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Galloway and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live from our studio in Shanghai, where it is presently 3 a.m. in the morning. The sacrifices I make for you. The two biggest stories in the world are unfolding right now at this very minute. The British Parliament is discussing the release of the Peter Mandelson, Jeffrey Epstein documents. The Prime Minister is desperately trying to suppress them, so much so that he has dragooned the Metropolitan Police to say that the release of these documents would be prejudicial to any investigation of Peter Mandelson. Actually, it's too late for an investigation of Peter Mandelson. You should have investigated him before you sent him to Washington as His Majesty's ambassador. The Epstein filth is flowing down every high street in every capital city in the Western world. The Epstein class is finally exposed. Oh joy, it is very heaven to be alive at this moment. Unfortunately, the talks between the United States and Iran have broken down, and Professor Marandi, our longtime guest, has said it's time to leave the Arab countries in the Persian Gulf. It looks ominous. We'll keep you up to date. We and our two top guests this evening. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Breaking in the last 1 minute, 30 seconds actually, the government has lost the vote to try and suppress the Epstein, Mandelson, Keir Starmer files. Well, actually they didn't lose it because they couldn't afford to put it to the vote. So big was the feeling amongst all these hypocrites in Parliament who beamed so warmly at Peter Mandelson over so many decades. Now they're shocked, they tell you, horrified, they tell you, to discover that Peter Mandelson, the man known since the 1980s as the Prince of Darkness, was indeed the Prince of Darkness. But they made it clear to the government that they would not be supporting Keir Starmer's efforts to suppress these documents. And so now all correspondence between Mandelson and Keir Starmer and advisors, as they debated the pros and cons of appointing, I'm not making this up, a man who received, together with his boyfriend, then husband, he received £100,000 in cash from Jeffrey Epstein. He received untold amounts in hospitality, flights, accommodation, designer belts, clothes, who knows, even underpants, over decades. Peter Mandelson, who phoned Jeffrey Epstein in prison, who called Jeffrey Epstein and said, "When is Liberation Day?" Liberation Day, not of Auschwitz, but of the release from prison of a convicted child sex trafficker. How shall we celebrate it, says Peter Mandelson. And Epstein replies with a couple of strippers, although I'm not sure Mandy fully grasped that point. But the situation is now critical. The Epstein class is being swept away. Crowned heads are falling in Europe. National security advisors, United Nations individuals, members of governments, ambassadors, in the case of Mandelson, and other ambassadors are, I understand, set to follow. This is a deluge. This is a kind of Versailles moment where the rotten ancien regime is suddenly swept away as a critical mass of opposition to it builds up, and they will hope to throw some sacrifices to the wolves like Mandelson. I mean, I just cannot. We've got a guest coming up, Mark Seddon, who will testify that both he and I knew who and what Mandelson was in the 1980s and struggled ceaselessly against his ever overweening influence within the British Labour Party and within the Labour governments of Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and then Keir Starmer. We warned you all, and I find it so amusing to see journalists and broadcasters who literally fawned over Peter Mandelson for 4 decades, now telling us that he's a traitor, that he's let down his country, that he's let down his party. If only they had known then what they know now, and all of this guff. Surely nobody will buy it. Keir Starmer not only knew who and what Peter Mandelson was, so did every journalist and every broadcaster in this country. Keir Starmer depended on Peter Mandelson, as Gordon Brown did, as Tony Blair did, as Neil Kinnock did. That's how old this story is. I've been rereading this afternoon Mr. Ben's diaries from the 1980s, 18 months into Peter Mandelson's increasingly tight hold on power in the British Labour Party. And Mr. Ben opines over and over what a danger to British politics, the British political class, was Peter Mandelson, but the journalists who were supposed to hold him to account, the broadcasters, instead of holding him to account, obeyed his orders to remove people from television programs, including Mr. Benn, one of the giants of British politics, removed from television programs after a telephone call from Peter Mandelson asking them to do so. But the British end of this story doesn't end at Peter Mandelson. This may sweep the British royalty, the British monarchy, away, because it wasn't just Prince Andrew, although boy was it Prince Andrew. We've just learned of a threesome, how gruesome a threesome between Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew, and a prostitute. Doesn't get any more lurid than that, does it? But it isn't just Prince Andrew. Epstein had the run of Buckingham Palace. Epstein had the run of the Queen's private airfield. Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were cavorting around the royal lodges in Windsor, in Balmoral. And actually, they had Harvey Weinstein with them once or twice. What company the British royals have been keeping. And of course, Prince Charles. What can I say about him without lèse-majesté? What can I say about him without YouTube suppressing, as they've suppressed this poll that we're running this evening? Imagine suppressing a poll on YouTube. What can I say about the king? Well, let me just tell you that the number one male influence in his life was Lord Mountbatten, a notorious paedophile, a revolting degenerate. Lord Mountbatten practically brought King Charles up. But I need to move on to the American end of the story, which is, of course, very much more important. Donald Trump's acting as if none of this is happening. He keeps giving press briefings. I mean, is he ever doing anything other than giving press briefings? Does Donald Trump ever actually sit down and think? I'm not going to suggest that he sits down and read, because we all know he's never read a book in his life. Never written one either, but that's another matter. Donald Trump, in his incessant, ceaseless press briefings, is acting like this, none of this is happening, and hoping that the complicit media, which is so utterly compromised by the whole Epstein affair, will go along with his pretense that none of this is happening. But on social media, there is a deluge, a tsunami of releases, of analysis, and never was it more obvious that in the media there are two entirely separate worlds. There's the world that William Hague inhabits, although he is seeking to inhibit. He inhabits a world in which he can say, as he did this evening, social media is incompatible with a democratic society, when of course the truth is the opposite. Democratic society has died precisely because of the establishment media cabal. I'm going to call them that word. The establishment media cabal has sought but failed to keep the people's minds on looking over there. They're trying to Russiagate the Epstein affair. It was Putin what done it. It was Putin that forced all these British journalists and broadcasters to beam so brightly and warmly at Peter Mandelson's return to the front line. Look at them. If you knew British journalists, every single towering pillar of British journalism is in that picture, grinning at Peter Mandelson as he takes a bow before him as he takes up office as British ambassador in Washington. Only little Beth Rigby there has declined to beam and smile. It was Putin that made them do all this. It was Putin that made these royals in Norway, in Sweden, in Denmark, in Britain cavort with Jeffrey Epstein. It was Putin that made these people accept all that money from Jeffrey Epstein. It was Putin that forced them onto the Lolita Express to commit God knows what crimes against what children and young girls and boys on Epstein's island. It was Putin that done it, don't you know? That jug-eared, half-wit Andrew Marr, formerly of sundry Trotskyite organizations, gave a monologue today in which he accused Russia and the KGB, which ceased to exist, of course, many decades ago. Actually ceased to exist before most of this even happened. It was the KGB what done it, according to the London local radio station LBC and the former BBC editor of politics, Andrew Marr. Is anybody buying this? It was Putin that was putting his dick in these little girls on Epstein's island? Seriously? The truth is, what Professor Morandi said here on my last show, he coined the phrase, picked up by Bernie Sanders today, I see, the Epstein class. The Epstein class has been ruling us for decades, but no longer. Everybody associated with seeking to cover up the truths in the Epstein affair, everyone associated with trying to make people look at Russia instead of Israel and the CIA, everybody who ever cavorted with Jeffrey Epstein, took his hospitality, took his money, took his plane to his island, and defiled the innocence of young girls and boys, will never work again. They'll never work again unless you're all stupid, unless you all are prepared to be ruled by the Epstein class. They'll never work again. Peter Mandelson did not commit suicide. Jeffrey Epstein did not commit suicide. Peter Mandelson is the most vengeful man I have ever known. When this dust settles, be sure that Mandelson will settle scores with all of his friends that betrayed him, including little Wesley Streeting, who, together with his mum, was Peter Mandelson's biggest fan, who was a schoolboy protege, nod nod, wink wink, of Peter Mandelson. He's turned against Peter Mandelson. Wait till Peter takes his revenge upon him. What's the guy in Brighton? Kyle, Peter Kyle. As close as could possibly be with Peter Mandelson. Nod nod, nudge nudge, wink wink. He's turned against him. Keir Starmer, who knew everything, but who still sent Mandelson to Washington as ambassador, has turned against him, called him a traitor, called in the cops. Peter Mandelson will undoubtedly go to prison. Mandelson may die in prison. The charges of influence peddling, of treason, of multiple breaches of the Official Secrets Act, of payola, of leaking state secrets and government information for money. Peter Mandelson may die in prison, but he will not commit suicide. If Peter Mandelson is found dead, trust me, he did not commit suicide. And moreover, from prison, We'll have prison diaries to rival Gramsci, to rival Oscar Wilde. Mandelson will sing like a nightingale about each and every one of his erstwhile friends who hath abandoned him. But I heard a guy on CNN, Gayatri will remember his name, she'll remind me later, an English guy, bald, talking about the rise and now fall of Peter Mandelson, and he actually uttered the word. It is a mystery, he said, how such a man could have beguiled the political class for so long. But he knows, I know, and now you know, that there was no mystery at all. Mandelson, a Zionist, a supporter of the State of Israel, was heaven sent to Jeffrey Epstein. This was an Israeli intelligence operation from the beginning, and I don't just mean the Mandelson affair. I mean the takeover of the British Labour Party. I mean the state capture of British politics. I mean the state and media capture of British broadcasting. I mean the destruction of the meteor that was Jeremy Corbyn and his brief leadership of the Labour Party. Peter Mandelson said that he wakes up every day determined to do everything that he can to destroy Jeremy Corbyn. This he said as a member of the Labour Party and as a grandee, moreover. This Israeli intelligence operation, that is the Epstein class, not the Epstein Files, not the Epstein affair, not just Jeffrey Epstein, but the Epstein class of politicians and journalists, has so poisoned our body politic that it is difficult to see how from it we can possibly recover. But we have to try. Otherwise, we accept that our countries are finished, our democracy is dead, our liberties and freedoms are otiose. Now, in the course of this show, it may very well be that the talks between the United States and Iran having broken down, that military action begins against Iran. If it does, you'll be the first to hear of it, and you'll be the first to hear what it might mean for the region and the world. But coming up is Mark Seddon, a 45-year friend of mine, former editor of the socialist newspaper Tribune, former advisor to the Secretary General of the United Nations, former member of the Labour Party's National Executive Committee, where he sat alongside Peter Mandelson. But most importantly, and the badge of honour that he carries, one of the very first people in the world to tell everyone that would listen, sadly too few of them, just exactly the disaster that Mandelson would lead the British Labour Party. Mark Seddon coming up after this. Stay tuned. He's a schoolyard bully, Piers Morgan. And he does have a big show, but then he has a big and plush and very well appointed studio. And he has a big and very well paid staff. He has a very big budget. He's an extremely wealthy man. And the combination of all of that does give you a certain head start. We, on the other hand, are a mom and pop business. There's just me and Gayatri. And the people who told me the phones are melting are my own grandchildren who are answering the phones for nothing. This is an unpaid gig I'm doing and do twice a week. Nobody pays me one brass farthing to make this show, to present this show. I'm not sure that Piers Morgan would tell you how much he makes.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Well, the poll tonight, which, as I told you, has been suppressed by 2/3 in the case of YouTube. How did Jeffrey Epstein die? Suicide? Murder? Or is he still alive? And unbelievably, about 50% of people believe that Epstein is still alive. It's hard to believe, but then it's all hard to believe. If you want to call the show, you can. It's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free in Britain and Ireland, 08081 965522, 965522. Worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Mark Seddon, journalist, former United Nations advisor to the President of the United Nations General Assembly, is very welcome. Mark, you told them so, but they weren't listening. They're listening now, are they?
Well, you never know, do you? I mean, Peter Mandelson's had so many revivals over the years, but I think this really is it. I think there's a great deal of hindsight around now. There are a lot of people who are probably very embarrassed about the way they've kind of supported Mandelson over the years. But for what it's worth, when George, I heard that you'd asked me to come on this evening, I kind of looked a few things up. And literally, this time last year, or the 6th of February, I think I wrote, whose idiotic decision was it to make Mandelson ambassador to the USA? Now, of course, I wasn't alone. You were saying the same. Many others were saying the same. Keir Starmer didn't listen. He's told Parliament tonight that actually not only did he not listen, but that he knew that Mandelson had kept this relationship with Epstein after Epstein had been released from prison. And then I was also thinking, because, you know, we saw, and you'll remember this, Neil Kinnock, who was leader of the Labour Party, brought a young Peter Mandelson in to revolutionise, he thought, the communications of the Labour Party. And this young Peter had previously been selling copies of the Morning Star around a North London tube station. I mean, that wasn't the only attraction for Neil Kinnock. But the thing is that he gave Peter Mandelson this job. And within a very short time, within the Labour Party, Mandelson was engaged in a real push against the trade unions, against the left. And again, looking this evening, I made a complaint about him in 1997, and my complaint at the time was that Peter Mandelson was breaking the rules around elections to Labour's ruling body. Now, for what it's worth, those claims were not agreed with by the Labour Party, but, you know, we had an inkling of what he was about from quite early on. And also, you recall, he was pushed out of the cabinet on at least 2 occasions. The first was the Jeffrey Robinson loan scandal. The second was the Hinduja passport scandal. And Tribune, the paper I was editing at the time, we actually broke the story about the Hinduja passport scandal. We had to do it by a series of questions because we didn't have any expensive lawyers, but we could all see what was going on. And it's just extraordinary that this love affair with Peter Mandelson just continued up until a few days ago.
Well, there's no mystery, really, is there? He was doing a job for the people who wanted to destroy the Labour Party as a meaningful, genuinely Labour Party. The Kinnock Project, and that's what they used to call it, you'll recall, from our callow youth, the project was to destroy the Labour Party of Tony Benn, of Michael Foot. Blessed be their memories. It was to change the Labour Party into basically a Clinton-esque party which was on the side of imperialism abroad, neoliberal economics at home, Israel, and all the other characteristics of late 20th century, early 21st century so-called social democracy. And Mandelson was brutally effective in all that, wasn't he?
He was. There have been three Labour leaders who saw through Mandelson and would have nothing to do with him. One was John Smith, who wasn't a left-winger, as you know. He was from the traditional old right of the Labour Party. The other one was Ed Miliband. And the third one was Jeremy Corbyn, who, of course, Mandelson boasted about spending every living moment, every living day, trying to get rid of him. But yes, you're right. Fundamentally, it was about the third way. It was about a new kind of politics, they called it, which was ideology free. It was based on this sort of Clinton view of triangulation, which constantly moved everything to the right. And as you were saying, George, it was also about ensuring that the membership and the unions had no real say. And also within this great political party as was, all those mechanisms for making policies that really mattered, that would have tackled poverty, inequality, all the traditional things that a socialist party wanted to tackle, they were pushed out of the way. It came back briefly with Jeremy Corbyn when we had that great surge of members, 500,000 people were in the Labour Party, and then was immediately killed off again when miraculously Mandelson reappears again. And there's another couple of discoveries we've made. And by the way, it's a question that you often raise, is that, you know, journalists often know that these things are happening, but when it was happening with Peter Mandelson, time and time again, they thought it was not important, they didn't bother to report it, they ignored it. But look, we have Peter Mandelson, we're now told, sitting down, vetting the candidates for the last general election for the Labour Party. We have Peter Mandelson just before, but as he's come back from being ambassador, actually sitting down and helping to advise about the reshuffling of Keir Starmer's cabinet. It's remarkable the way Gordon Brown brought him back. And look what Mandelson did to Gordon Brown in return. But each time this, and you know, I suppose we shouldn't get carried away because, you know, it's not just one person that completely undermines a great political movement and has sent the Labour Party off into what, 10, 15% levels of support. That's his legacy. It's other people too. But on top of that, it's much more pernicious because you'll recall that one of the first things he did when he was made ambassador to Washington by Keir Starmer, who knew that he had continued to have these relationships with Epstein, the first thing that happens is that Mandelson is pictured with Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, and the head of Palantir, this AI defence technology company that's just won, I think it's a 240 million strategic partnership agreement with the Ministry of Defence. Now that's a huge story. Let's see if the press get all over that.
Well, Mr. Benn in his diaries, writing in the 1980s, described Mandelson as a Rasputin-type figure, Mephistophelian, with all the dark arts. He was called, I'm not sure who called him at first, the Prince of Darkness. So there's no surprise at the dark arts of Peter Mandelson. And the journalists who are now pretending with hindsight that it's all a mystery are surely completely now exposed and compromised. But what of Keir Starmer? I can't see how he survives this, Mark. He is the man who appointed a man he knew to be rotten in this regard to the plum position of British ambassador to Washington, and together with all his other troubles that have reduced him to, correct you, it's 11% in the public opinion polls. I don't see how Starmer survives this. Do you?
No, I don't. And I know it's going to be very tempting for a lot of people to blame others, as is often the case. Morgan McSweeney, who's been Keir Starmer's bag carrier, fix-it person, who is really quite instrumental in bringing Mandelson back into the fold yet again. Obviously he's in big trouble, but so is Keir Starmer. And it's not as though Keir Starmer can turn around and say, oh, well, I didn't really know what I was doing. I took advice, I hadn't really heard about Peter Mandelson before. Nonsense, of course he had, because, right at the very beginning, when Keir Starmer wanted to become leader of the Labour Party, was promising all of those policies that Jeremy Corbyn supported and the Labour Party supported, and everybody voted for him on that basis. He was already conniving with Peter Mandelson. Peter Mandelson was already involved, popping up at this and popping up at that. So I'm sorry, this is something that can't be pushed aside and blamed on somebody else by Keir Starmer. The buck clearly stops with him. I noticed this evening that his erstwhile former deputy leader, Angela Rayner, has stepped forward and is saying, no, you can't decide, which files get released. It's got to be. We can't have a sort of drip Epstein type delivery of files and videos and material here. So yes, I think this pent-up frustration in the parliamentary level, because many of these Labour, at least 200 of these Labour MPs or so, are likely to lose their seats, maybe more. And the attempt by Andy Burnham to return was blocked by Keir Starmer, hence probably losing Labour this by-election in Manchester to the Green Party. It's just extraordinary. So I find it very difficult to believe that Keir Starmer can survive, like you, George. And I also think that essentially others will be waiting their chance. But what difference will it make unless there's a fundamental change in the whole direction about honesty in politics for a start, about democracy, and for any political force of the left? I don't think is going to come from the Labour Party, incidentally. But there's going to be a lot of manoeuvrings, and I agree with you, I can't see how Keir Starmer survives this.
Of course, one of the problems the Labour Party, to which we both used to belong, one of the problems, one of many, is that the two putative successors to Keir Starmer are each in their own way compromised. Wesley Streeting was a schoolboy protege of Peter Mandelson. He scarcely could be closer to Peter Mandelson, even though he's now turned on him. He's done a reverse ferret this evening on his mentor. And the other is the woman you just mentioned, Angela Rayner, who herself was forced to resign as Labour's deputy leader and as a cabinet minister on an ethical scandal about tax evasion. So Labour isn't over endowed with potential successors to Keir Starmer, are they?
No, they're not. And if you go back to the 1970s and look at the calibre of political leadership and alternatives there were then, to when Harold Wilson went or when Jim Callaghan went. I mean, you had people, whether you agree with all of what they said or not, it is by the way. You had people like Roy Jenkins, you had people like Tony Benn, like Barbara Castle, like Tony Crosland. I mean, these people were giants. And let's be honest, most of the public haven't heard of many of these contemporary politicians. They may well have heard of Angela Rayner, and yes, of course, she had to resign. So I mean, it does not look good at all. But then, really, the Labour Party and these MPs and putative new leaders should never have allowed this tiny cabal to take over, for people to be traduced and for a former leader, Jeremy Corbyn, to be treated in the way that he was. They all took part in all of that or sat back and did nothing. And we've reached a place where we are today. Yes, 11% in the polls, as you said, but there is no hint of an understanding that essentially what this Labour movement was built up for. They've lost sight of what it's all about. They don't have the policies. And the public have lost trust in them, and therefore, the trade unions.
I think to the contrary, Mark, that they haven't lost sight of it. They don't believe in it. I mean, when we were comrades in arms, people on the right would say, yeah, of course, we'd love to do all that. but we can't for this or that reason. That's not the position today. They actually don't want to do the things that the Labour Party was set up to do. They don't believe in them. That's a sea change, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is. And I think really it also goes back to this sort of explosion in corporate lobbying and the power of the big corporations, the money, that kind of sleazy world of politics and revolving doors and corporations and lobbying. And essentially, yes, I mean, you just pick your topics. The water industry, one of the most popular calls for nationalisation. Most people want to see the water companies nationalised for a very good reason. But none of them will agree to do it. Now, well, are they in the pockets of these corporations, these private companies? Are they scared of them? I mean, it's just beggars belief. But this is the rot that Peter Mandelson helped institute and drive deep into the heart of the Labour Party. And I think this is why the unions have got to wake up, finally, those who are still affiliated to the Labour Party, because they cannot allow this to continue. It's their members' money that is being used with a political levy. And how many of their members will actually be voting Labour at the next election at this rate? So, you know, they've sat...
We're running out of time, Mark, so if I may ask you to put on your New York hat. You were, of course, a distinguished official at the United Nations. Looking at the American end of this Epstein scandal, I'm saying Keir Starmer shouldn't and can't survive it. Does Donald Trump survive this deluge?
Well, I mean, from what I can see, a lot of this material hasn't actually come out yet. And the accusations are flying that material is being deliberately withheld that could implicate Donald Trump more than he has been implicated so far. He is somebody who clearly keeps on wanting to change the subject, of wanting to move on. He didn't want these Epstein files. When he was campaigning for office, it was a big thing for him. But when it came to him actually having to do it, he didn't want that. I'm sorry, but he was all part and parcel of that whole sleazy entourage. And at the end of the day, the big question is, you know, how much did he know? Did he partake? And all the rest of it. But of course, you know, he doesn't really... I mean, if he can do it, he would rather prefer that there aren't any midterm elections, or they're sufficiently frustrated to dampen down the vote significantly that he isn't so damaged. So, I mean, he will be wanting to move on from this, to focus on, you know, issues such as bombing Iran, kidnapping other leaders that he doesn't want, his absurd Ponzi board of peace scheme, but also, as we've seen in Minnesota, Minneapolis, you know, the weaponization, these goon squads, this ICE squads being used in Democrat heartlands to intimidate voters from going to the polls. Tonight we've got Steve Bannon saying we need to have ICE agents at the polling stations, designed to intimidate. And in the worst scenario, does he bring in the 1807 Insurrection Act, as he keeps on hinting at, and stopping elections altogether? So, you know, it may well be that the Epstein Files are the least of the worries for the American people going ahead. This is a dangerous man who, once he realizes that he has nowhere else to go, is really capable of doing anything.
Anything, and he may indeed do it in Iran this very evening. Mark Seddon, a pleasure to talk with you again. Thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Let me take a quick break, and then it's your calls. Right up to the hour. Stay tuned. My grandson Swann, who's answering the phones tonight, had his first 1 million view tweet about Gaza, and I predict great things from him. So we're not going to go away. We believe in the next life. We believe that we will all be judged on what we did in this life, and that will determine our fate. And so we face whatever we have to face, if not with equanimity. Can't say that the experience was one that one can feel sanguine about. It was genuinely horrific. and I'll never forget it. It was the more horrific for being unexpected by me. I never believed that someone like me, of my age and with my background and with my position in British politics, would ever be told that I was being held under the Terrorism Act. I'm not unmoved by it, but I'm certainly undeterred by it.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
How did Jeffrey Epstein die? That's the poll question tonight. Suicide, well, almost nobody. In the case of the Patreon polling place, 0 believe that Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide. A lot of people believe murder. But look at this intriguing option. Still alive. On Telegram, 41% believe Epstein is still alive. On X, 50% believe he's still alive. On the YouTube community poll, 35, more than 1/3 of you believe that he's still alive. On the YouTube stream, that's those voting and watching on YouTube right now, 49% believe that Epstein is still alive. If he's still alive, where is he? And what a story it will be if somebody stumbles upon him. Get voting on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, on the patreon.com/George Galloway. Well, the phone lines are extremely busy, as you might imagine, but I don't have any calls on my screen right at this minute, though that may be a technical glitch. So let me turn. Oh, we've got Guy in Newcastle. It just didn't make it to my screen. I am all the way in China. Guy, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Good morning, George. Long time no speak. George,
And you, sir, on you go.
Yeah, listen, we've got to try and put a little bit of comedy into this terrible situation we're in. So I'm going to propose Keir Starmer was innocent and he knew nothing. And the reason I'm going to say that is because these following people also knew nothing. Woody Allen knew nothing. Idil Barak, the former MP of, PM of Israel, he knew nothing. Weinstein knew nothing. The Windsors, Andrew and Fergie, they knew nothing. Clintons, Bill and whatever his wife, Hillary, they knew nothing. The Trumps, he knew nothing. Melania knew nothing. Branston knew nothing. Gates knew nothing. Ratner, the director of Melania, the movie, he also knew nothing. That Slovakian MP who's had to resign knew nothing. And the following definitely knew nothing. CIA, MI6 and Mossad, they all knew nothing.
It's very funny, Guy, when you put it that way. You're right. There are amusing codicils to all of this. And when you put it like that, it looks and sounds perfectly preposterous. I could go through that list you just made, seriatim, but let me just choose one of them. Fergie, the former Duchess of York, a duchess, a member of the British royal family, a confidant of the Queen when she was alive, hated by the Duke of Edinburgh, loved by the Queen. The Duke of York, Prince Andrew, the Queen's favourite son. We're supposed to look up to these people. We're supposed to believe that somebody, God even, sent these people to rule over us. We sing a national anthem of total obeisance to these people. We have one of the few national anthems in the world that isn't about the country at all, but is about the monarch. Monarchs are bad enough when they're great warrior kings like Henry VIII, but when they are King Charles and his brothers, I'll exempt his sister, Princess Anne, the only decent one amongst them, Surely people begin to say in Britain, I mean, shouldn't we grow up? Isn't it about time we dispensed with this kind of childish nonsense? Shouldn't we put away childish things? But the more I think of that list you've just given us, it is indeed a powerful litany of the most powerful and influential people in the world in our lifetime, Guy, and it ain't over yet. Neither our lifetime nor their hegemony, their domination. After all, it's the same people that are running the same media, the same banks, the same businesses, and the same political systems and spectrums that are still in power today. They need to all be swept away. It's now time for a peaceful, democratic revolution, which sweeps away the old and brings in the new. I just don't understand any objection to that. When William Hague says, as he did tonight, former leader of the Conservative Party, one of the most influential men in British politics in my lifetime, when he says that social media is incompatible with democratic society, I mean, how wrong can you be? That's how wrong William Hague, at least, is. Thanks, Guy. Now you can leave comments. You can scan the QR code now, leave a comment on the YouTube stream, and I'll try and read it out. Health First 23 says, we saw the collapse of the Prime Minister today at Prime Minister's Questions. Well, I've only seen the bits where he was shaking uncontrollably. I only saw the bits where he had to hold down his shaking hand because he knew it would be visible to the cameras which are somewhere above him in the gallery. I think he's a dead man walking. I think Keir Starmer is a dead man walking. After the Manchester by-election and after the local government elections in May, it is inconceivable to me that he can survive. Peep Show 090 sends £5. Thank you very much. Sir Keir should have seen all this coming. What with all that free crap Lord Ali gave him. And Richard Tyler says, Labour died in 1997. No surprise, Parliament is full of grubby little people. Christina Hines says, Mandelson was paid well to spread lies, smears, and misinformation about Corbyn. John Cohn, KOHN, says Mandelson was MP for poverty-stricken Hartlepool in the northeast of England. One night, in a fish and chip shop, he asked for some guacamole on his chips, only to be told it was mushy peas. Look, live breaking news, live to Florida, where Simon from Weaponized News has news on the Epstein Files. On you go, Simon.
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway, and to your worldwide audience. Well, I'm trying to live up to my nickname online as Prince of the Obscure, and I would like to draw your audience's attention to the fact that the I in the name ISC does not stand for independent. This body that the Mandelson / Epstein Files is now going to have the material referred to is in fact the Intelligence and Security Committee. And its governing rules are largely set up by the Justice and Security Act of 2013. And in that, if one were to refer to Part 1, Section 3, Subsection 4, as I'm sure all of the audience are already quite familiar with, it actually says the Intelligence and Security Committee must exclude any matter from any report to Parliament if the Prime Minister, after consultation with the ISC, considers that the matter would be prejudicial to the continued discharge of the functions of the security service and the Secret Intelligence Service and the government communications headquarters, or any person carrying out activities falling within Section 2.2. So basically, the situation is that it's been referred to a room, the 9 members of which are all subject to the Official Secrets Act, and they cannot make any disclosure about any material, however it's received by them, that relates in any way to activities of the intelligence and security services of Her Majesty's government of the United Kingdom. And therefore, not only does this organisation have a reputation for putting out very tardy reports dealing with matters in much like the International Court of Justice does with a 10-year delay, it's unlikely that we would ever see any of this material, notwithstanding the request from the Metropolitan Police Service that's now being treated as a binding legal obligation upon the Cabinet Secretary, which it absolutely is not. But this rather obscure parliamentary manoeuvre called a manuscript amendment that was negotiated by the Tory party and the Labour Party huddling behind the chair of the Speaker of the House of Commons is completely a red herring. This committee is not authorised to declassify the information it receives, nor is it authorised to release any of the material. And they actually face criminal sanctions under the Official Secrets Act were they to do so, even in the form of an unauthorised leak. So this is not the panacea that your previous guest thought may be the case. And whilst we have seen somewhat of a disturbance among the ruling party in the House of Commons today, given the revelations that have been made, it's not going to result in what most of the mainstream media think is going to happen. And in fact, the most important question, as we all sit fearful of the negotiations due on Friday being cancelled between the Iranian government and the American government, that may see another ultimate distraction from this, is what was Peter Mandelson's connection with the lobbying firm in which he held a very large stake called Global Counsel, who was actually acting as an intermediary between Palantir, the technology company that now has 24 NHS contracts and many MOD contracts? And was it in fact not despite his connection, Peter Mandelson's connection with Jeffrey Epstein, that he was appointed, but was it actually, one might consider, because of his connection with Jeffrey Epstein and the two-way flow of information that was occurring, that would give him a whip hand in dealings with the Trump administration, because of the potential information about Donald Trump that Jeffrey Epstein could give to Peter Mandelson, or indeed had in the past given to Peter Mandelson before his untimely disappearance. So that's another aspect.
Disappearance is a good way. A disappearance is a good way of putting it, Simon. Let me just press you on one or 2 points, and I think you've done a signal service to the audience this evening by making the point that the ISG is the Intelligence and Security Committee, ISC, not anything remotely independent about them. They are stooges of the secret state, and the ball has been put into their court as a result of a cooked up deal within the Uni party between Labour and the Conservatives, literally handwritten, a manuscript amendment. You know, the rulers are in trouble when they're forced to write in freehand a manuscript amendment, but they successfully averted a vote this evening by this manuscript amendment, and now the matter is in the long grass. We will not, of course, ever know, not for 60 or 70 years, the full details of this. That's why we have to stop playing parliamentary games. That's why, Simon, we have to stop playing uni-party games in the UK and in the United States. They're all in it together. It's one big club, and the mass of the people, both sides of the Atlantic, are not in it. Am I right?
I would entirely agree with your summary there, Mr. Galloway. And I do think that it's going to be a very convenient delaying tactic that the Met has requested that these documents not be released, even if it were possible that the Intelligence and Security Committee were to decide to do so. And it's also very interesting that it's now reported by the Telegraph that President Trump is going to have a conversation with Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Britain tonight, supposedly to give his final go-ahead to the Chagos deal. So it seems unlikely that these rumours that Keir Starmer is going to resign tonight would seem very, very unlikely until that transaction has been completed. But unfortunately, this is only the tip of a very, very large iceberg. And it should be recalled that only half of the Epstein documents have so far been released in the United States. So whatever kerfuffle these disclosures may have caused in the United Kingdom Parliament today, it's, as they literally would say on the old British sitcoms, only the half of it.
Brilliantly put. Simon in Florida from Weaponized News. Much obliged to you. Now, the Moats sponsorship is so important to us. We can't do this without your help. So a big thanks to this week's top donors who visited moats.tv website and made their donation. Tony Dillon, Maysam Al-Kaisi, Jim Squires, Dan Raj, and Pam Atkinson. A big thanks to each and every one of you, and a big thanks to every one of you in advance who's going to make their donation this night on moats.tv. Let's squeeze a call in before the break. Nathan is in Seattle and wants to talk about corrupt politicians. That may take some time, Nathan.
Hello? Yeah, George.
Yeah, go on. You're on the air. Hi.
I wanted to put forth the notion that none of our enemies that we are told to hate, no Chinese leaders, no Iranian leaders, no Venezuelan leaders were on the Epstein list. And I look at people like Maduro, he was not on the Epstein list, and someone like Trump who went after him was definitely on there multiple times, probably being blackmailed. And I think no one who's on the Epstein list has any credibility, even if they're not on the 3 million pages that were released so far. If they're in support of Israel or the genocide going on in Gaza, let's just assume that they're on the Epstein list, or they just like genocide. And I
think that's a very good point. We could make that the default position, Nathan. We're going to assume that you corrupt politicians are in the Epstein class unless we have concrete evidence to the contrary. That's not a bad rule of thumb, is it?
I don't believe so. And I would like to see people of consciousness join in something like ICE to go after the dual citizen holding people in Israel as well. Because we got so many issues that are all interconnected, like our the ICE raids that we're seeing. They're being trained in Israel, and all of our problems stem from one serpent. We need to get rid of the head, and that includes getting rid of all the pedophiles in our government. We need revolutionary change. It's not going to be come from voting in one style of pedophile over another. They all got to go.
Nathan in Seattle, powerful stuff. Let's take a quick break, because coming up after that break is Ben Swann, my erstwhile colleague on American television, who, even more than anyone else in the mass media, can truly say he warned us all about this a decade ago. Ben Swann coming up after the break. Stay tuned. There's a legend on the line in Oklahoma. It's May on Trump. Welcome back, May.
Trump is using a magic 8-ball to make his decisions. He apparently has completely lost whatever mind he had to begin with. This is just ridiculous. Does he really think anyone's going to believe that? I'm here to say, and I'm here to join you and everybody else, the emperor has no clothes on. He's as naked as they come. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure he got naked with some young people. And that is why he so desperately is trying to kill this whole Epstein thing. And he's just making it worse.
I'm wondering when Donald Trump knew that he was implicated in these Epstein files and what it was that he knew. That's the big question, because he wouldn't have been banging the Epstein drum all this time and then suddenly to pull the rug. That tells me that it was a late decision, that someone came late to Trump to say, you know, you really don't want to be doing that.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
How did Jeffrey Epstein die, or indeed did he die at all? You can vote on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, and on my patreon.com/George Galloway. It's a close run thing between murder and still alive, I've got to tell you. First call then is the people's poet in red car. It's Christopher on the Epstein Files. What else could it be on, Christopher? And what poetry and what epic saga this has all turned out to be.
Well, I'm not in red car at the moment. I'm in London because I've just got myself a London agent, so that's all good stuff. But I mean, to be honest with you, George, like
excellent.
For years, it is really good news for me. But I mean, for years and years, you know, people have been using this term conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorists to apply to people to sort of silence them. And some of the things that are being said, right? Vladimir Putin saying, "Oh, you know, the leaders of the West have been vampires and they feast on human flesh and all of this, you know." And then I watched, just by chance, I watched a clip of yours from Sunday night's program on TikTok, and like, you know how much I respect you and how much I respect your standing as a politician and everything else. And there you were on this clip on TikTok, and you were talking about sacrifice and satanic rites and cannibalism and eating human flesh. And all of a sudden, all of these conspiracy theories are no longer conspiracy theory, if you know what I mean. And the magnitude of everything just completely blew me away. And it begged me to ask the question, just how much do the people at the top know, and how far does it spread? And what I thought most of all was, I've seen both politicians on the left and politicians on the right, and people on the left and people on the right, and they're all saying, the people on the left are saying, Donald Trump's involved, and then people on the left are saying, and on the right are saying, well, Bill Clinton's involved, and so on and so. And it goes beyond party politics, This is about a global elite who've been out of control for God knows how long. And if this doesn't wake people up to the wickedness and the evil in this world, then I don't know what will. And all I can say is thank you for having the cojones for actually coming out with it on your program, because suddenly, obviously, you've got your researchers and you've read the Epstein Files and whatever, but suddenly these things now have credence because you had the courage to come out and say, look, these people have been eating people, you know, these people have been involved in satanic worship, and all those conspiracy theories are now no longer conspiracy theories. And we, as people, an electorate or whatever, we can't ignore this anymore. Do you know what I mean? We just cannot ignore it. And left and right really should unite, because the whole system, George, the whole... people talk about, is Starmer involved? And there's rumours online he's going to be gone in 3 or 4 hours. But you've got to ask the question, how many people in the Labour Party knew that Mandelson was involved to the level? And surely...
Well, all of them. Christopher, you've just showed the kind of poetic sweep with which you think and speak, and I'm very glad that you've got this London agent. You deserve every success. Your play, your one-man show, your poetry is so powerful. So thanks and congratulations on that. All I was doing in my monologue on Wednesday, which now millions of people have seen, and it's growing, by the minute, vaulting the number of people who watch my monologue and who watch Professor Morandi and who watch the show on Wednesday is headed for an all-time record. But all I was doing was adumbrating the allegations that are made in these Epstein files, and moreover were made up to 25 years ago. These are not allegations that came forward last week. These are statements to the police, statements to the FBI about these horrors, this vampire's ball, as President Putin described it. I must say, I like a very great deal of what Vladimir Putin says. I think he is overwhelmingly head and shoulders above the leaders in the Western world. But that particular speech he made, in which he said the vampire's ball is coming to an end, will turn out to have been his most historic. Because it has been a vampire's ball, perhaps even literally, but certainly metaphorically. And it must come to an end, or the world will be coming to an end. I'm one of the few people in contemporary political life who doesn't just believe in God, but talk about God. And of course, lots of American politicians talk about God, but they don't really believe in God, or they wouldn't do the things that they do. But I believe in God, and I try to do what God would want me to do. But if I believe in God, it is axiomatic that I believe in Satan. I believe that Satan is present in the world, and that evil is the work of Satan, and that some humans are Satan in human form. And I have to say that I have long believed that Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson, who were joined at the hip, were a satanic force for bad. I didn't know Jeffrey Epstein before the scandal. I'd never heard of him before. The only thing I know about him is his deeds. Of course, I never met him or any of the Americans involved in this affair, but I have to say that Jeffrey Epstein is a satanic force, but he's not a marginal force. And I think the main takeaway for me about the Epstein affair is that Jeffrey Epstein was a very important man indeed. You know, you see at the airport, VIP, VVIP. This man was a VVVIP. This man was central to global politics in the Western world. And the Western world has, until recently, been the dominant world in global affairs. So that means he was central to the dominant sphere in the world that dominated and ruled more or less everything. That makes him a very important guy. That makes him a very much more important guy than any Dr. Evil in James Bond picture. It makes him much more significant and important than here today, gone tomorrow Western politicians. If you look, as I've been doing, I haven't read the 2,700,000 documents yet, but I've read a lot of them, and the span of politicians that Epstein has been influential amongst is enormous. Not just in political allegiance, but you look at somebody's name and you say, who was he again? You've forgotten him, he's gone. He was a minister 25 years ago. He was a prime minister 20 years ago. You've forgotten him. But Epstein was always there and well placed to immediately leech on to his successor. And that's the secret of this operation. It was so-called left and so-called right. It was Britain and America, but also the European hinterland. It was President Macron. Did you know that Epstein was heavily influential with President Macron? That President Macron himself asked Jeffrey Epstein for economic advice, for tax advice. This man's influence was truly phenomenal. Phenomenal. And it's only because I know Peter Mandelson intimately, don't take that the wrong way, not that intimately, but because I know him so well that I'm majoring on him this evening and on Wednesday. But I could just as easily, if I was French, fasten on Macron's relationship with him. I could fasten on the Democrats' relationship with him. It's just that the Republicans are in power now, so I'm more interested in their relationship with him. If Bill Clinton was still the president, I'd be equally remorseless in pursuing him. Christopher, thanks for that wonderful call. Now, on the podcast news, we are in the top 10 for politics in the Gambia, Nigeria, Benin, and Lithuania, and the top 20 for politics in Pakistan, South Africa, and the top 50 for politics in India and Greece. Please download the Moats podcast by scanning the QR code in the corner of your screen now. Now, let's go to my old home country of Scotland. Andrea wants to talk about the Epstein Files. Andrea, welcome.
Hi, George. Thanks for taking my call this evening, and God bless you. I'm just phoning because I was, to be honest with you, as a Scotswoman, I'm a wee bit annoyed with you.
I don't know if you do, but that's because my earpiece has popped out, maybe. Andrea, we don't seem to have you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Andrea, are you there?
Yeah,
I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Right, okay. Right, I'm just phoning, George, right, because God bless you for taking my call, right? I'm phoning you because in the past, maybe over the last year or so, right, I've heard a few folk calling on the show. I listen to your show regularly, and I respect a lot of the things that you say. But I've listened to a few folk that used to call you and that, and they would kind of tiddle around about these sick details that are coming out now about the Epstein Files, right? And you kind of ridiculed them a wee bit. So I'm just phoning really to say to you, maybe you should issue an apology to no certain individual people, but there was a few that phoned you and kind of skirt you around but I think they were a bit feared to say to you in case you ridiculed them even more. But now that it's all kind of coming out, right? The reason that I'm phoning you is because I remember years and years ago, I'm 50, right? And I remember years ago reading a book called It's the Michael Tarragha Story, and he's a London man. He's dead now, he died of cancer. And him and his sister were taken for their home when they were only babies. And he speaks about how Ted Heath and Mountbatten used to go down to the children's home and pick out whatever bairns they wanted and take them out of the island, and how they used to take them out into a boat on a lake and make them jump into the lake, and when the wee laddies would come out, obviously their wee penises were hard and things like that. Come on, I mean, so this kind of thing has been going on for generations. And
well,
for
look,
me, as a Scots
we
person,
can't. No. Stop. You are, first of all, accusing me of ridiculing people for what I presume you mean. I called them conspiracy theories. Well, maybe I did. I once believed that it could not possibly be true that the American state was involved in the world-altering events of 9/11. I no longer believe that because I have new facts. When facts change, so do my opinions. So if you've got facts, bring them to me and you'll change my opinion. But I can't allow evidence-free talk, especially when it's frankly nonsensical. The conflation of the Ted Heath affair and the Mountbatten affair is silly, and they weren't taken over to Ireland. Mountbatten was preying on children in Ireland. Ted Heath was accused of preying on children in England. They were not accused of together preying on children as a duo or as a duet. You just can't say wild things, many of which are completely inconsistent, illogical, and expect me to allow it on the air on the Mother of All Talk Shows, because if I did, I'm not predisposed to doing so anyway, but if I did, the show would be decommissioned. The YouTube would put it off the air. I told you earlier, they even suppressed the poll this evening. Imagine. So if I allowed you and people like you to make wild allegations against people on the air, I wouldn't have a show. And if I didn't have a show, then millions of people every week would be deprived of that show. So I'm sorry, Andrea, you'll probably now tell me I owe you an apology, but I don't believe that I do. Now comments. Ange says, how many of Epstein and Maxwell's mates, associates, etc. have their grubby Zionist hands on UK's NHS, MOD, MOJ, etc. The Zionist contracts re Palantir, Oracle, and other systems. And Opt Propaganda Panda says, first Jimmy Savile and now Epstein. The royal family have some interesting friends. Oh, indeed they do. Reader 481 says, the picture of dead Jeffrey does not match the living Jeffrey. He is 100% alive. Well, I certainly can't say he's 100% alive, but I definitely agree with you about the dodgy dead pictures. Radiant Star 8997 says Epstein is unalive. They couldn't afford to let him live. He knows too much. I think that's a very powerful point. Grey Scout Epsilon sends $10 US. Thank you very much. These sickos are worshipping the devil and consume the blood of terrified children. It's called adrenochrome. Watch and see. Stay the course, George. Meran is in England, in Norwich, on the Epstein Files. Meran, welcome. What would you like to say?
George, what I wanted to say, I'm an Iranian living in the UK, and what kind of shocks me in that is that in the Anglo world, in Britain and America, sex scandals seem to be such a huge deal, but when a huge numbers of people are killed by Britain and America, that doesn't seem to stir so much passion or compassion in this country. A good example would be during Clinton. I mean, when sanctions were placed on Iraq and 500,000 children under 5 died, it hardly made any difference. And yet, when him and Monica Lewinsky had that brief thing that I don't want to mention, I mean, that was such a big scandal. It got far more coverage than 500,000 dead Iraqi children. Don't get me wrong, the Epstein thing is absolutely horrific beyond belief. But compared to the crimes and the millions of people, and in my country, 92 million people, we are really suffering in Iran because of sanctions. We can't get medicine, we can't get food. Hundreds of thousands of people dying because of American sanctions. and yet, a sex scandal, is such a big deal. This I don't understand this, and this is throughout the history of.
Well, you make Miran, you make several very powerful and important points. Frankly, cruelty to animals or taking your crop to the nose of a horse would get more public ire and indignation and sympathy, empathy than the massacre of hundreds of thousands of children in Gaza got over the last period. Of course, millions were outraged and mobilized and demonstrated and boycotted and did all the things that that God would want them to do. But tens of millions, scores of millions did nothing at all and were entirely unmoved by it. But if you showed them a West Ham footballer kicking his cat, or someone being cruel to their dog, or beating a horse, they would be outraged. So we still have a long way to go before we have won the majority of humanity to empathy. But that's our fault if we haven't succeeded in winning them to a better position, not theirs for being still in a state of sheephood. The reality is that this is not a sex scandal. If it was a sex scandal, it would have long ago faded from the public mind. It's a sex story. It's a domination story. It's force. It's older people exploiting younger people for sexual purposes. It's all of these things, yes. But it's also a financial scandal. These people were all making money with each other at the expense of the rest of us. But above all, it's an espionage story. It's a story about how Israel and the United States intelligence, which are more or less one and the same thing, collected information from this ring of depravity and used it to compromise and blackmail political leaders all over the world to the benefit of Israel and to the benefit of United States intelligence, even including using it against their own political class to make sure that the political class stayed in line with deep state priorities. Now, a quick word about our Workers' Party live event tomorrow night. That's Thursday night. Campaign Talk with Mark Belshaw. He's a great young fellow, actually. Mark Belshaw, joined by Wajid Burki. It starts at 9 p.m. UK time on the Workers' Party YouTube and X, as well as, of course, on my channels. Do try to tune in. Let me take a quick break, and then it's the maestro, Ben Swann, up next. Stay tuned.
As the green smoke rose, their faces flashed out, pallid green, and faded again as it vanished. Then slowly the hissing passed into a humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Suddenly, a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out after it. Forthwith, flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man were suddenly and momentarily turned to fire.
Okay, you've got 20 minutes to cast your vote either on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on X, on YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream, or on my patreon.com/George Galloway. And I've got to tell you, it is a dead heat, if you'll forgive the pun, between the option that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered and that Jeffrey Epstein is still alive. How tantalizing is that? That's one of the things I'm going to ask my good friend and a great professional, Ben Swann, who is the founder of Truth in Media and Sovereign Media. Ben, welcome back. Been too long since we worked together. I said earlier, you were one of the very few, and maybe the only, for a time, journalist, broadcaster, who was warning us about all of this. Tell us how that felt and what's changed. How come everybody now knows that what you were saying a decade ago was correct?
Yep. Yeah, George, it's great to be on with you. I guess it's as simple as this. You know, as we said, well, the sign says it right there behind me on this side. Epstein is Pizzagate, right? Pizzagate is bigger than just Jeffrey Epstein, though. And so for a decade, as you mentioned, a decade ago, I was the first guy to come out. What do they say? The first bird out of the bush is the one to get shot. That's literally what happened to me. The first one to stand up and say, this online conspiracy theory, first of all, the media is lying about it. They're lying to you about where it comes from. They're lying to you about the specifics around it. And all I did was just take a look at it and say, this is what the theory says, and here's where it comes from. It comes from emails that include a lot of code language, John Podesta's emails, that involve a lot of code language that is used by pedophiles, right? That's really all the story was. We pointed to the facts surrounding what was known as Pizzagate at the time. And for that, obviously, there was a very heavy price to pay professionally. So I paid it. So what? Doesn't matter. I'm grateful for everything that's happened since then, and certainly grateful to have been able to stand up at a moment when a lot of other people could not or would not stand up. A decade later, though, what do we find? We find that in the Epstein emails, he's using a lot of the same language and talking the very same way. And here's what I find so fascinating about this, George, is that in 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, if you go back and you look at the Podesta emails and the specific emails referring to pizza and hot dogs and cheese pizza, the terminology that was used, which, by the way, was really first alerted to by self-proclaimed pedophiles on 4chan and 8chan. They were the ones who said, hey, does anybody else notice that's language we use? They were the ones who actually alerted to it. And I'm not saying John Podesta is a pedophile, right? I'm not making that claim. All I'm saying is that the claim was he's using an awful lot of code words, or a lot of words that are also used as code words by pedophiles. Now, here's what's interesting. When you read through these Epstein files, 911 times we see the terms for pizza and grape soda come up 911 times in these files. And all of those files, by the way, those emails are from the same time period, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. Why is that significant? Because I believe now that the reason we don't see those emails after 2016 and after 2017 was because of a thing called Pizzagate. Because of the fact that people like me and others stood up and said, by the way, this is the language that's being used. All of a sudden, that language went away. It doesn't mean they stopped doing what they were doing, but the language changed. And so it's very interesting to me as a journalist, as an investigator, to look at and see that Epstein was using a lot of the same language in these emails at the same time period as the emails that sparked Pizzagate in the first place.
It is one long and dismal chain of events. Without doubt, that's now established. But how central was Epstein to this whole affair? Was he, as Megyn Kelly very unwisely said, interested in the quote-unquote barely legal, or was he actually involved in the trafficking and raping of children? And were the people who were involved in the earlier Pizzagate revelations also involved? Were they present in the circle of Jeffrey Epstein?
So a couple of questions there let me try to answer them in this order. So first of all, we don't know, right? So the most important and most honest answer is we don't know. What we do know is that there are layers to this. So here's how I would best describe it, George. At the base level, everyone who's anyone over the last couple of decades seems to have known Jeffrey Epstein, right? Somehow, remarkably, Epstein seems to have connected himself to everyone, whether you're a musician, a model, an actor, a professional athlete, a politician, a money manager. He's connected to all these people, right? I guess that's the job of a CIA/Mossad asset, which is clearly what he was. It was to honeypot and to connect himself. He was connected to all these people. But does that mean everyone that Epstein was connected to is therefore a pedophile? Absolutely not. And so when you see these files, just because someone's name comes up in them does not mean that that person either was interested in underage girls or is a pedophile. Only an irresponsible person, I think, would believe that. That's the widest point of the circle. But then there's a circle within that circle of people that Epstein was apparently partying with, having fun with, taking to his island, taking to his New Mexico ranch. And that's a smaller group, but it's a group that is more involved maybe in the barely legal, because there are a lot of women who were trafficked and taken advantage of who were barely legal. But then there's another circle within that. And that's the circle that I'm concerned about all of it. Don't get me wrong. But the one that I'm most concerned with is that smallest circle where the evidence seems to point that there was an additional group of what you might call elites. I hate the term because it makes it sound like they are special people. They are not. They're depraved people. But these elite pedophiles, if you will, who are interested in the ritualistic and systematic abuse, and even in some cases torture of young children and the sexual abuse of young children. There is a small group that seems to be within that group. And the Epstein Files so far seem to bear out that Epstein was not interested in only, as you just pointed out, the barely legal. Not true. That was part of it. But there seems to be a lot of evidence mounting from these files that he was very interested in very young children as well. What's frustrating about this whole situation is that when you mass dump so much information, so many emails, so much communication, and you wrap so many people's names into it, what does that then begin to look like? Well, it looks like either everyone's guilty or everyone's name in there, so really no one's guilty. That's what it starts to feel like. But we could do a very easy exercise, in my opinion, to resolve some of this. There's an email that's been making the rounds today where someone writes to Epstein in 2014, and they mention how they say, your littlest girl was a little naughty last night, right? Had a great time last night. That's the context of the email. It's 2014. Here's the problem. The name is redacted. The only piece of information on this email that is redacted is the name of the sender. Now, George, why is that name redacted? Because I understand the idea of saying we've got to redact some names, and there are some people who, just because they're in these files doesn't mean there's anything sexual about these emails. But this one clearly is an email that references a sexual act. It clearly seems to represent the idea that it's a child when it says the littlest girl. So who are they talking about, and who sent this email? And in my opinion, there is a small circle within all these files that are the people who are involved in it is a satanic, in my opinion, a satanic group of people who seem to take pleasure in the ritualistic abuse of children. Who are those people? And that, I think there's a very simple exercise to find them. Anyone who's using code language, let's see the names. Or law enforcement should be seeing those names. Anyone who's referencing children, let's see those names. Law enforcement should see those names. And that's where we should really begin. Not with 3 million documents and saying everyone's equally guilty, but with focusing on the ones that seem to be pointing toward actual crimes against children.
But law enforcement is seeking to suppress all of this, has sought to suppress all of this. Kash Patel almost certainly perjured himself in front of the American Congress when he said there's no evidence that Epstein was trafficking to anyone. So Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison for no reason and is innocent. So law enforcement is entirely politicized in the United States. And Donald Trump is Kash Patel's boss. And Kash Patel is suppressing the proper investigation of these matters.
No, he absolutely is. How Kash Patel and Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, do not resign tomorrow, I have no idea how you can save face at this point. Because remember, just a few weeks ago, what were we hearing? We were hearing that there were no Epstein Files at all, that there was no client list, that Epstein most certainly killed himself. He was not murdered. Dan Bongino, who no longer is even with the FBI, maybe had the shortest tenured career in the FBI in history, and now is back on his podcast, is out there saying, I was out there, man, fighting the good fight. You guys were doing nothing. You weren't fighting the good fight, Dan. Dan Bongino was laying cover for pedophiles. Dan Bongino was refusing to acknowledge the fact that there was millions, not just a couple, millions of documents that point toward Epstein's connections and his clients. And the fact that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi have gone around telling everyone there's nothing to see here, how can you possibly have any confidence in them and their leadership as the top law enforcement agents in the country? The only reason they'll be allowed to keep their jobs is because President Trump says, let's stop talking about Epstein. I don't think the public should go away from it. I think that we should be calling daily for the removal of Kash Patel as the head of the FBI and the removal of Pam Bondi as the Attorney General. Give me Matt Gaetz. Give me somebody else. Anybody else, but not these two, because they have discredited themselves to an unbelievable extent.
No, well, it's definitely not going away as an issue in Britain, and I'd be surprised if it does in the United States either. But it's funny that Epstein seems to have been so close to Woody Allen, because Woody Allen made many great films, and one of his underrated and great film was a film called Zelig, which was an imaginary figure who appeared in every great historical event. He somehow inserted himself into every picture. That's what Epstein was doing. This is not a guy, I'd never heard of him until the scandal began, 5, 6, 7 years ago, began to know about him, mainly through people like yourself. But this guy has been for decades, or was, if he's now deceased, for decades, right at the heart of global politics, Western politics. Putin wasn't hanging out with him. Xi Jinping wasn't hanging out with him, but everybody who was anybody in the Western political media class was connected to Jeffrey Epstein. It's obvious, isn't it, that he was an agent of American intelligence, Israeli intelligence, if there's any difference between these two things. But now in Britain, at least, they're trying to Russiagate the matter. They're trying to say it was all Putin that done it. How absurd is that?
Yeah, it's. I told someone the other day, I said, I've heard almost every scenario about Epstein that there is, right? Every claim about him that there is, because I have been covering him actually since 2013. So in that case, it's been long time, 12, 13 years that I've been covering Epstein, long before most people even knew who he was, to your point. And I will say that in all those years, I have never heard the claim before that Epstein was tied to the Kremlin or was tied to Putin. In fact, what the files bear out is that Epstein was not tied to Putin, but he was very closely tied to Zelensky. He was very closely tied to the upheaval in 2014 in Ukraine, that he sought to connect himself to Ukraine to take advantage of the situation there. And again, from these files, it seems to appear that he's connected to Zelensky in the attempt to traffic children out of Ukraine during the course of this war, and saw this as an opportunity. So what's interesting about this is what we see happening, again, as you said in the UK, is this attempt to say, well, it's all Vladimir Putin. See, Epstein's bad, therefore he must be tied to Russia. When in fact, he was not tied to Russia. He was a CIA asset, no question about that. And he was a Mossad asset. There's no question about that. Just as his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, there in the UK, well known as a Mossad asset, who then commits suicide by jumping off of his yacht and drowning for no apparent reason. And within a very short time after that happens, some substitute teacher that no one's ever heard of by the name of Jeffrey Epstein becomes friends with Ghislaine Maxwell. And then suddenly he's a billionaire financier, right? The money came from somewhere. And it didn't come from Putin, and it didn't come from the Kremlin. To your point also, the fact is that about Jeffrey Epstein that is incredibly impressive is that on top of, and I don't mean that in a facetious way, it really is impressive to think that this man, on top of being a prolific sex offender, maybe one of the most prolific sex offenders in human history, he is also so busy working deals with every powerful person in the Western world. Again, it's not just politicians, and it's not just those who are in finance or in technology, but every major athlete and model and actor he seems to have a connection to. This guy worked 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week, it seems like, in order to honey trap as many people as possible. So if he is a Mossad agent, which again, I think all the evidence points to that, and working with the CIA, and I think all the evidence points to that, the fact is he was very effective at what he was trying to do.
Without a doubt, I mean, no James Bond character could possibly match the achievements of Jeffrey Epstein, the most prolific sex offender in human history, almost certainly, although Genghis Khan might have done more, I don't know, too long ago. But he was also, without a doubt, the most successful agent in human history because, well, frankly, he has compromised thousands of the most powerful, influential people in the Western world. Where does this all end, Ben? Is it going to bring down? It's going to bring down Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer might be out of 10 Downing Street tomorrow. Speculation is mounting here. Is it going to do for the Trump administration also?
It's a tough question, and I really don't know the answer to it. I certainly hope there is a reckoning associated with this, but I'm not convinced that there will be. In fact, I think it's very possible that we won't necessarily see that, and instead what we will see is a lot of confusion surrounding these files, distraction, an attempt to move on to other stories. Some big event will take place that all of a sudden grabs up the attention because Americans, we're not very good at holding our attention on one thing. And so moving on from Epstein could happen, I think, much quicker than it should. What I hope will happen is that the public won't let this go, and that will continue to push and press, and that some of these powerful people who are associated, especially with the most heinous crimes that seem to be found in these files, will be brought to justice. I'm not convinced that that will happen, but I do believe that if that doesn't happen, kind of a secondary victory would be to see that by the public being awakened to this, it would shift and change the ability of those who would seek to harm and to violate the most defenseless in our societies. It would put them on notice, and it would cause a disruption in their networks. So at the very least, I would hope that is happening. I believe to some extent, and maybe I'm naive, that 10 years ago, the exposure that surrounded Pizzagate created a disturbance within that space. I'm hoping that 10 years later, what's happening with Epstein will create a new disturbance in that space. And ultimately, these things can be dismantled, but it may take a very long time for that to happen. And it may also take a continued awakening in the consciousness of people to recognize that this is happening so that we can then stand against it. At least today, George, at least today, there are more people today who acknowledge that, yes, this is happening than there were just 3 or 4 days ago. And that alone is a victory.
Amen. You mentioned some significant event, a black swan event, wag the dog, call it what you will. That may be imminent in the Persian Gulf right now. And if there is a US-Israeli attack on Iran, it will be a major regional war. And that may very well be the black swan event and the economic collapse in Europe, at least, that will be concomitant with the closure of the Straits of Hormuz, the disruption to oil and gas flows, and so on. Maybe they're going to wag their dog so violently that war, big war, is the only way they can make us look over there. What do you think?
I think that's very possible. I mean, typically, that is the kind of event that it requires, because it isn't just a 1 day or 2 day event, right? It drags on for weeks, months, or in some cases, years. And it's very easy to move the news cycle over something like war. And for Americans especially, we rarely pay a price for war. Our soldiers do, and our economy does, and our treasure is lost as a result of it. But in terms of the average person, doesn't necessarily feel the effects in the short term. And so it's easy to use war as a way of just creating distraction and obfuscation. And I think that very well may be the case. I certainly hope it is not. I hope that this administration continues to resist, because we've been hearing for days and weeks that it's imminent and it's going to happen, and yet it hasn't happened yet. So I'm hopeful that it won't happen. And I'm certainly hopeful it won't happen as a deliberate decision to create distraction and to cause people to move on from this story.
Lastly, Ben, I'm grateful for your time. I've been intimately involved with the Robert Maxwell story for many decades, actually, 4 decades. I'll tell you about that next time we meet. But Ghislaine Maxwell is still, I was going to say rotting in jail, but she's been moved to a rather cushier, open type of prison. But what of her? She's a potential bomb, isn't she? Is her security safe?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I would have thought actually that Ghislaine Maxwell, I'm surprised she's even still alive now, because she does know so much. I think the reason she is because there is now a certain level of confidence within those circles, those highest circles associated with Epstein, that there's not going to be a push to get information out of her. I think when Epstein was arrested, and I know there's a whole poll going on your site right now about whether he's still alive or whether he was murdered, and last we saw it was tied. Listen, the jury's out on that. Is he still alive someplace? I think there's a lot of evidence that indicates he could be, and that was not his body. There's also a lot of evidence that he was murdered in prison. The one thing there's not evidence for is the idea that he committed suicide. That's the one thing that I think most sensible people can agree, other than Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, can agree did not happen. But I think the reason that Epstein was either removed and moved on or was murdered, one of those two scenarios, is because there was an unsure belief about how the administration would treat him, whether or not he would ultimately be forced to testify, and what he would say. I think now there is a pretty strong confidence that nobody's going to make Ghislaine Maxwell talk. Nobody's going to cut her a deal. Nobody's interested in getting information out of her. As you said, she's been moved to cushier grounds. There's no reason to offer and to continue to build suspense around this story. In fact, keeping Ghislaine Maxwell alive goes along with the same narrative, which is that there really isn't much to this story and it's time to move on. Killing her only heightens the attention on the story.
Ben Swann, you're a star man, founder of Truth in Media and Sovereign Media. I hope to see you soon. Thanks very much for joining us, Ben Swann. Great interview. Let's go straight into calls. Julie in Vancouver wants to talk about the same subject. What other subject could there be? Julie, what do you want to say?
Yes, hi, George. Hi to your team. Thank you for taking my call. So, yes, first of all, I would like to say that the media is so complicit about the whole story, because they keep on saying Epstein Files, but actually it's Epstein crimes. And the way that they say that, oh, it's an embarrassment for those elites, it's not. They are committed crimes. What they did was so, like Cindy McCain said, everybody knew in their circle. So how come she didn't know anything? How come they didn't know anything? So they're all complicit, and they all should be, tried for what they knew, because it's a crime. When you know a crime and you don't report it, it's a crime, right? So they should be reported. And
Absolutely.
the way that they say that, that they make it like it's not a serious issue, but we're talking about pedophilia, pedosatanism, and they want us to believe that this is how they do. This is normal. This is not normal. It's been going on for decades. And I saw, you had it on your show, Maria Farmer. She's been talking about that for 30 years. So, and nobody did anything.
Yeah.
And today, I mean, if I don't agree with your guest, because I feel that it's not going to do anything if they get away with all that, the 3 million documents. If nothing happens, nothing's going to ever happen. They're going to be, empowered to do worse things, because Epstein's crimes is so outrageous. It's blowing my mind, and the fact that we're still here and nobody is going to jail. I mean, if nothing happens, they're going to say, oh, okay, if it's the Epstein crimes didn't do anything, so we can do the worst thing. Nobody's going to talk about it. So we have to. Well,
the greatest irony would be, Julie in Vancouver. Thanks for the call. If the only person who went to prison over the Epstein affair was Peter Mandelson, who was a very great friend of Ghislaine Maxwell, and that's probably where I should leave that. Big donors tonight. Big shout out to those who went to the moats.tv website, all of you who made a donation, but the biggest donations were Saskia Bakker, Bob McPherson, Ursula Kufi, Gerard Magari, and Donna Ross. My goodness, Donna Ross, who is a regular and recently crowned legend, because not only are her donations wonderful, so are her telephone calls to the show. Thanks, Donna. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to all who are going to, over the course of the next day or so, go to moats.tv and make their donation. Scan the QR code right now. Well, I went to my home country of Scotland with one of the previous callers. It wasn't the best experience. And now I'm going to my hometown of Dundee, where Charlie wants to talk about Mandelson. On you go, Charlie.
Good evening, George. Very good show as always. And I hope everything settles for you over in Shanghai. And just to let you understand, you're not missing the weather.
Thank you. It's lovely here. I don't know why I didn't move to Shanghai earlier.
What I've always wondered, when Gordon Brown sold off the UK's gold reserves at the bottom of the market, was he advised by Peter Mandelson?
It's a good question. And of course it was the worst thing that Gordon Brown ever did as Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he did several bad things. The PFI, PPP, wheezes as a source of funding for public infrastructural development and so on, whereby the hospitals got the money through private finance initiatives and ended up paying 8-10 times more than they would have if they had got them from the public exchequer. But I don't know who advised them. It's a good question. What I will say is Gordon Brown's definitely out to get Peter Mandelson now, because he feels betrayed from the day and hour of John Smith's untimely death in the 1990s until now. Gordon Brown has resented Peter Mandelson, but felt that he needed him and brought him back into government, only to discover in the Epstein Files that Peter Mandelson was saying to Jeffrey Epstein that so decrepit was Gordon Brown's administration that he, the Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, who should be in a sanatorium. That's in writing. Charlie, last word to you. What's your take on the Mandelson affair? Is it going to bring down Keir Starmer?
Well, Gordon, George, I really think Mandelson or other people have got something on all the political prime ministers, because it didn't make any sense for him to be appointed after his track record. Now, another thing which puzzled me over the years, when Ghislaine Maxwell was in a relationship with Epstein, and they were in London. That was at the time of the Daily Mirror pension money going missing. I'm just wondering if he had advised Robert Maxwell to put it someplace that it was untraceable. But unfortunately for the people and the pensioners of the Mirror, Mr. Maxwell fell off the boat, apparently.
Well, he fell off the boat like Jeffrey Epstein hanged himself in a New York prison cell. There's nobody believes the latter, and anyone who believes the former is fooling themselves. Robert Maxwell was murdered, according to Jeffrey Epstein, because he was demanding $400 million to bail him out, or he'd tell all about his work with the Mossad over many years. So the Mossad dispatched a squad to push him off the back of that boat. Did Jeffrey Epstein hang himself with paper towels? Well, if you believe that, I've got a bridge in London I could sell you going very, very cheap. In fact, the poll numbers, I'm closing the poll now, the poll numbers suggest that most people think he was murdered, but followed by a close second option that he's still alive. And it's very, very close. But virtually nobody voted tonight that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks to everyone who's called tonight. Sorry if you didn't get through. But now, here's the woman without whom the news wouldn't be the news. Here's Gayatri. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, let's go to Africa, because yes, the Epstein Files reached all the way to Africa. Peter Mandelson, it turns out, after he left his office in Parliament, he sought to persuade Epstein to establish a private bank in the Congo for the management of Congo's oil. Now, in this setup of making this bank, he was talking to Qatari, Singaporean funders, but he specifically requested the Congolese officials to meet with Epstein, because according to him, in his words, and these are documented in the Epstein Files, Epstein knows more about finance than anyone else and is a good friend and trustworthy person. So that is the Epstein Files in regards to Africa, and it actually stayed at that state of conversation, an initial conversation. This bank never came to mature, or Mandelson didn't seem to ever proceed in the Congo in that sense with Epstein. But he did make it all the way there.
Epstein didn't just have the run of Buckingham Palace, he had the run of 10 Downing Street. Tony Blair met Jeffrey Epstein at Peter Mandelson's request.
Sure.
And that much is clear. Buckingham Palace, Balmoral Palace, Windsor Palace, they were all playgrounds for Peter Mandelson and Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. If I can use the word, the penetration of this operation into the highest places in multiple countries is simply staggering, don't you think?
Yes, it's unbelievable. How do you call it? Because I was just mentioning Congo, did you know that on this day, 5th of February 1885, is when the Belgian King Leopold II stole the Congo and made it his own property. So it wasn't even a colony, a country's colony. It was his personal, the king's
personal estate.
Yes, exactly.
The richest country in Africa was the personal estate of the king, just like it was in Belgium.
Yes, exactly. Now, very quickly to staying in Africa, because 2 days ago, on the 2nd of February, the Russian Foreign Intelligence revealed that Macron, mentioned in the Epstein Files, approved his special services to launch a plan to remove unwanted leaders in Africa. And what happened this morning?
Well, the first of many, I suspect, the son of the late president, leader of Libya, Gaddafi. Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi was slain in Misrata in his garden by foreign mercenaries. Our friend Afsan Ratansi believes that the British intelligence led this operation, and the reason being, of course, that Saif al-Islam was the only leader who could bring Libya back together again. And everyone who knows Libya knows that if there were free elections in Libya, Saif al-Islam would have won them, so they killed him. They murdered him, they assassinated him. Incidentally, he's one of the people that Peter Mandelson leached on. Peter Mandelson leached on the son of Gaddafi for money. That I know for a fact. And he oiled the wheels of many things that Saif did in London. But when Saif was overthrown, or Gaddafi was overthrown, and Saif was imprisoned, someone said, "What are you going to do for Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi?" He said, "Who? Who's he?"
Incredible.
Peter Mandelson is a very rum character. But of course we know the other African leaders that will be in the sights of Macron's foreign legion, and they should all be redoubling their security. Anything else before we go, because we're a bit over time now?
It's good. It's good to go for some chips or breakfast.
Well, the only good thing about doing this show in the middle of the night is that we definitely get chips. We get eggs. We get breakfast. Just in half an hour or so, the breakfast places will open. So it's goodbye from us in Shanghai, from the Mother of All Talk Shows. If you enjoyed it, do make a donation at moats.tv so you can keep it going and bring another viewer next time on Sunday. We'll be back. See you then.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.